my brother said. You owe me your bonus, I have a family to feed. And my parents agreed. I quietly transferred my savings elsewhere, and the next month when he asked for more. I always knew my brother, Mark, was irresponsible. He had spent his entire life coasting, never holding down a steady job, always finding an excuse for why he needed help, and always expecting someone else to foot the bill. But somehow, my parents never saw it that way. To them, Mark was unlucky, misunderstood, going through a rough patch. I, on the other hand, was their responsible son. The one who always did the right thing, who studied hard, who worked overtime to pay my own way through life. And because of that, they had a very simple philosophy when it came to family finances. I should help because I could. It had been that way for years. The extra money I sent when Mark's car broke down. The rent I covered when he was between jobs. The groceries I paid for when his savings ran out. I never wanted to, but every time, my parents guilt-tripped me into it. He has kids to take care of. You wouldn't want your nephew and niece to go without food, would you? So when my job gave me a well-earned bonus last month, I expected the usual routine. What I didn't expect was for Mark to come to my house, sit down at my kitchen table, and say, "You owe me your bonus." I blinked. "Oh?" Mark leaned back in his chair, completely at ease, and shrugged. "Look, man, I've got a family to support. You're single. You don't have kids. You don't need that money as much as I do." I had to remind myself to breathe. "Excuse me?" My mom, who had come along for moral support, placed a hand on my brother's arm as if he was the victim here. "He's just saying, honey. You make good money, and Mark is struggling. You think I owe you my bonus?" I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. Mark scoffed. "Come on, dude. It's not like you worked harder than usual for it. It's just extra money. And we're family. Family helps family." I stared at him. Then at my mother, who was nodding in agreement, looking at me with that familiar disappointed frown, the one she always used when I didn't immediately cave. Something inside me hardened. This time was going to be different. I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers together on the table. "No." Mark blinked. "What?" I said no. I repeated, feeling the unfamiliar but deeply satisfying weight of the word. My mother gasped, like I had just announced I was disowning the family. "You don't mean that," she said quickly. "He's your brother, and he's struggling. Don't be selfish." There it was. Selfish. The word they always used when I didn't immediately open my wallet. Mark leaned forward, arms crossed. "Come on, man. It's just money." I almost laughed. The irony of it all. To him, my hard-earned bonus was just money. But if it was just money, why didn't he earn it? Why didn't he save it? Why didn't he do anything to help himself instead of coming to me like I was his personal ATM? "I work hard for what I earn," I said evenly. "And I'm done handing it over just because you can't be bothered to manage your own life." Mark scoffed. "That's real nice of you, considering my kids could go hungry. You don't seem that worried about them when you're out drinking every weekend." I shot back. That hit a nerve. Mark's face darkened, and his jaw clenched. My mother's eyes flashed with warning, like she couldn't believe I would dare to call him out. "You don't have children," she said sharply. "You don't understand the responsibility. That's why it's your job to help." I stared at her, waiting for her to hear how ridiculous that sounded. "I didn't have children, and that's why it's my job?" She waved a hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. It's easier for you. You have extra money." I gritted my teeth. "You mean my money? The money I earned. That bonus was for me, and I'm keeping it." Silence. Mark glared at me. My mother shook her head in disappointment. "I'm ashamed of you," she whispered. The words should have stung, but instead they felt hollow. Because I suddenly realized something. I had spent years trying to prove my worth to them. Being the responsible one, the reliable one, the good son. And it didn't matter. None of it mattered. They didn't respect me for it. They didn't appreciate it. They just expected it. I stood up. "Well, that's unfortunate," I said, grabbing their coats from the chair and handing them over. "Because I'm not changing my mind. And I think this conversation is over. Mark snatched his coat angrily. You think you're better than me? I met his gaze, calm and steady. No. I just think I deserve to keep what I've earned. My mother grabbed her purse and shook her head as she made her way to the door. You'll regret this, she said bitterly. Family always comes first. I watched as they walked out, closing the door behind them. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The silence after they left was almost eerie. I expected to feel guilt. A nagging, uncomfortable sense that I'd done something wrong. After all, that was how it had always worked. Mark would demand, my parents would pressure, and eventually, I would give in. It was a script we had followed for years. But this time, I had rewritten it. And I felt relieved. For about 2 days. Then, the phone calls started. At first, it was just my mother, leaving long, guilt-laden voicemails. Mark is really struggling. The kids need new clothes. You're their uncle, don't you care? Then Mark started texting. Mark, real classy man. Just ignore your own family? Mark, you wouldn't be where you are if Mom and Dad hadn't raised you. Maybe you should start acting grateful. Mark, you'll come crawling back when you need something. Don't expect us to be there for you. I rolled my eyes at that last one. Mark had never been there for me a day in his life. Then my father called. He rarely got involved in these things, preferring to let my mother handle it, but when he did, it was never pleasant. I picked up. You're embarrassing this family, he said, skipping all greetings. I sighed. Nice to hear from you too, Dad. Don't get smart with me. Your brother is struggling, and you're sitting on a pile of money like some selfish. No, I cut in. I'm sitting on my money. The money I worked for. The money I earned because I actually show up to work every day instead of waiting for someone else to bail me out. There was a beat of silence. Then he scoffed. Listen to you. Talking like you're better than us. I never said that. You didn't have to. He snapped. You think you're so high and mighty because you've got a good job? You think that means you can just abandon your family? I pinched the bridge of my nose. Family helps family, right? Exactly. Then why aren't you helping Mark? Another silence. What? He said, caught off guard. Why don't you help him? If it's my job as his brother, isn't it your job as his father? More silence. Then click. He hung up. I laughed under my breath. Of course. My parents only cared about family responsibility when it was my responsibility. But I wasn't stupid. I knew this wasn't over. People like Mark and my parents didn't just accept the word no. They pushed. They manipulated. And when those didn't work, they escalated. I had a feeling that was coming next. I knew my family wouldn't give up easily. But even I underestimated how low they'd go. For a few days, things were eerily quiet. No texts from Mark, no guilt-tripping voicemails from my mom, no sudden pop-ins at my doorstep. I should have known better than to think that meant they had accepted my decision. Then, on Saturday morning, I got a call from my Aunt Karen. I almost didn't pick up. She wasn't someone I talked to often, but something told me this wasn't a social call. Hey, Aunt Karen, I answered cautiously. Are you okay? She blurted out. I frowned. Yeah? Why? She sighed. Your mother called me. She's saying you've been acting strange lately. That you've been isolating yourself, pushing family away, and making reckless financial decisions. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Unbelievable. She said she's worried about you. Karen continued. That maybe you're not thinking clearly and that, well, she suggested I should check in to make sure you haven't done something drastic. I nearly choked on my coffee. Wait. You think I... She made it sound like you were having some kind of crisis. My aunt said hesitantly. Like maybe you were depressed or... I groaned. Let me guess. She told you I suddenly became cold and unfeeling, stopped answering calls, and refused to support my brother's family? A beat of silence. So she did lie, Karen muttered. Yep. I could almost hear my aunt rolling her eyes. That woman. I knew something didn't sound right. I told her you probably just set boundaries for once. I chuckled. And how did she react to that? She got defensive and said, well, we're his parents. We're allowed to be disappointed in him. I sighed. Karen, I appreciate you checking in, but I promise I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I just decided to stop being their personal ATM. Well, she said thoughtfully, it's about time someone did. But you know they're not going to stop, right? I knew. And I had a feeling the next move was coming soon. After my conversation with Aunt Karen, I knew my parents were far from finished. Their usual tactics, guilt, manipulation, and now spreading rumors, hadn't worked. That meant they were going to escalate. Sure enough, I didn't have to wait long. The next day, I got a text from my cousin, Daniel. Daniel, dude. What's this about you refusing to help Mark's kids? I sighed. Here we go. Me, what exactly did they tell you? Daniel, that you got a huge bonus and refused to share, even though Mark's struggling. That your mom and dad are heartbroken over how selfish you've become. That they're worried about you. I don't know, man, it sounds messed up. I rubbed my temples. They really were going all out. Me, let me clear this up for you. My huge bonus was something I earned after months of hard work. Mark didn't ask for help. He demanded the entire thing, like I owed it to him. And when I said no, my parents acted like I was committing some kind of crime. Daniel didn't respond right away. When he did, his answer surprised me. Daniel, yeah, that actually sounds more like them than what they told me. That made me pause. Wait, what exactly did they tell you? Daniel, that you told them you didn't care if Mark's kids starved. I let out a sharp laugh. Are you serious? Daniel, dude, they were practically crying about it. I shook my head. It was almost impressive how low they'd stoop. They weren't just twisting the truth, they were flat out lying, turning me into some heartless villain who was abandoning innocent children. But that wasn't even the worst part. Because the very next day, I got a call from my boss. Hey, he said casually. I wanted to check in on you. Everything okay? My stomach dropped. Yeah? Why? Well, he hesitated. Someone called HR with concerns. I nearly dropped my phone. What? Yeah. They wouldn't say who they were, but they made it sound like you were dealing with some, financial stress. Said you might be making reckless choices that could impact your performance. I closed my eyes and gritted my teeth. My parents called my job. They were trying to make me look unstable. I took a deep breath. Look, I have a good guess who made that call, and I can assure you, I'm fine. It's a family dispute. They didn't get what they wanted, so now they're trying to mess with me. My boss was quiet for a second, then chuckled. Figured as much. Just wanted to check in. No one here's taking it seriously. I let out a breath. Thanks. But the second I hung up, my relief turned into pure anger. They weren't just trying to guilt-trip me anymore. They were trying to ruin me. And I wasn't going to let it happen. That was it. The final straw. Messing with my reputation at work? Trying to make me look unstable? They wanted war? Fine. I spent the next hour locking down everything. I transferred my savings to a new account. I removed my parents from my emergency contacts. I blocked Mark, my mother, and my father. I even set up alerts in case they tried to open credit in my name. When I was done, I sat back and let out a slow breath. For the first time in years, they couldn't reach me. Couldn't guilt me. Couldn't take anything else from me. I was finally free. Or so I thought. Because exactly 1 month later, Mark showed up at my door. I almost didn't answer when I heard the knocking. It was late, I wasn't expecting anyone, and after everything that had happened, I had a very strong feeling I knew who it was. But curiosity won. I opened the door, and there was Mark, standing on my porch with a sour look on his face. What do you want? I asked, already exhausted. He scoffed. Seriously? That's how you greet your own brother? I crossed my arms. Considering the last time we spoke, you tried to guilt-trip me out of my bonus, and then our parents tried to sabotage my job? Yeah. That's exactly how I greet you. Mark rolled his eyes. Whatever, man. Look, I just came to talk. About what? He hesitated, then sighed. I need help. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course you do. My landlord's kicking us out, he said, shifting uncomfortably. I just need a loan to. No. His head snapped up. You didn't even let me finish. Because I don't need to, I said, keeping my voice steady. The answer is no. Mark clenched his jaw. So that's it? You're really gonna let your own niece and nephew end up homeless? I leveled him with a look. No. You are. Because you had every opportunity to get your life together, and instead, you banked on the idea that I'd never stop bailing you out. Mark's face twisted with anger. You're such a selfish. I shut the door in his face. He pounded on it once, but I didn't reopen it. A few seconds later, I heard him storm off. I exhaled. This time, I really was done. I thought that was the end of it. That after slamming the door in Mark's face, he'd finally get the message. I was wrong. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A new number. I didn't recognize it, but I had a strong suspicion. I answered. So this is what it's come to? My mother's voice was sharp, thick with manufactured disappointment. You're slamming doors on your own brother? Turning your back on your family? I sighed. Did Mark run crying to you already? Do not be disrespectful, she snapped. Your brother came to you in need, and you treated him like a stranger. That's funny, I said flatly. Because that's exactly what he is to me now. Silence. Then she switched tactics. Honey, listen, she said, her voice suddenly softer, more delicate. I know we've had our differences, but we're still your family. We raised you. We love you. But you're being cruel, and I don't understand why. What happened to the kind, generous son I raised? I closed my eyes. I knew the script by heart. The we're still your family speech. The we raise you guilt trip. The what happened to you? Act as if I was the one who changed, instead of just waking up to the truth. I wasn't falling for it. Not anymore. You want to know what happened to me? I said evenly. I got tired. Tired? She repeated, as if the concept was foreign to her. Yes. Tired of being your backup plan. Tired of being treated like an ATM instead of a son. Tired of you and Dad only calling me when you want something. Tired of Mark acting like my money is his money just because he decided to have a family he can't afford. My mother's tone turned ice cold. You should be ashamed of yourself. No, I said, voice steady. You should. I hung up. And this time? I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. I expected more calls. More messages. Maybe even another unwanted visit. But after that last conversation with my mother? Nothing. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Silence. At first I didn't trust it. This was my family we were talking about, people who had spent years perfecting the art of guilt-tripping me into submission. People who never let go of an argument if there was even the slightest chance of winning. And yet, nothing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being hounded. No daily texts from my mother. No sudden emergencies from Mark. No passive-aggressive calls from my father. It felt strange. And then I realized why. They were waiting. Waiting for me to break first. Waiting for me to feel guilty. Waiting for me to pick up the phone and say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Of course I'll help. Because that was what I had always done before. They weren't staying silent because they accepted my decision. They were staying silent because they thought it would make me crack. But this time I didn't. Instead, I focused on my life. For the first time in years, my paycheck lasted the whole month. I bought things for myself without feeling guilty. I started planning a vacation, one I wouldn't have to cancel because someone in my family needed the money more. And the craziest part? I felt lighter. Like I had been carrying a weight on my back for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Then, 3 weeks after Mark showed up at my door, I got a text from Aunt Karen. Aunt Karen, haven't heard from you in a while. How are you holding up? I smiled. Karen was one of the few people in my family who actually listened, who had never once tried to pressure me into giving up my boundaries. Me, honestly? Pretty good. Aunt Karen, glad to hear it. Just a heads up, your parents are telling everyone you're going through something, and will come around soon. I chuckled. Of course they were. Because in their minds I had to come around. I had to break. That was the only way the cycle had ever worked. But not this time. This time, I was done. For good. A full month passed. A month of peace. Of keeping my hard-earned money. Of living my life without waiting for the next crisis to land in my lap. I should have known it was too good to last. One evening, just as I was settling in with a beer and a movie, my phone buzzed. Unknown caller. I debated ignoring it. But something told me to pick up. Hello? A small, shaky voice answered. Hey, it's me. It was Mark. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the phone. The last time we spoke, he had been pounding on my door, furious. And now? He sounded defeated. I know you don't want to hear from me, he said. But I didn't know who else to call. I exhaled, already bracing myself. What happened? Sarah took the kids and left. That caught me off guard. Sarah, his wife, had finally had enough? She said she's tired of me never getting my act together. He admitted that I always expect other people to fix things instead of fixing them myself. I stayed silent. He let out a shaky breath. I think she's right. I blinked. Had Mark actually just admitted fault? I screwed up, man. He continued. I thought people would always help me. I thought you always would. He paused. I don't blame you for cutting me off, he said quietly. I guess I wanted to say I'm sorry. For the first time in years, Mark wasn't demanding. Wasn't playing the victim. Wasn't expecting me to fix things for him. And because of that, I said something I never thought I would. I hope you get your life together, Mark. He let out a tired laugh. Me too. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was talking to the spoiled, reckless brother I had spent years enabling. I was talking to someone who had finally hit rock bottom, and knew it. And that was something I could respect. But still, I wasn't going to fix it for him. Take care of yourself, I said, and then, before he could fall back into old habits, I hung up. I had passed the final test. For the first time, I had broken the cycle. And I was never going back.